July, I brought Jake and Olga to the Flathead Mine. It's a silver mine located in the northwest part of Montana. My family has very deep roots at this mine, and I wanted Jake and Olga to see the place that I grew up and spent a significant amount of time as both a child and young adult. In 1912, two young boys found a large uprooted tree when rounding up cattle. The uprooted pine tree exposed some peculiar-looking rocks, which later proved to be found very rich with silver. By the early 1920s, a small mining community was carved out of a virgin forest in the northwestern part of Montana, where the uprooted tree was found. The Flathead Mine was over 30 miles from the nearest town and was without running water or electricity. Initially, in 1926, the mine was set up as a single-man's camp with two-man cabins built. But later, families would locate to the mine, which would result in the construction of a one-room schoolhouse built in 1935. In the 1930s and 1940s, at its peak of operation, Flathead Mine had over 100 miners and 43 families that were living there. All of the water had to be hauled up from a natural spring about 7 miles from the mine, which served as both drinking and bathing water. The mine operated successfully until 1944, when after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, saw many of the young men employed by the mine leave to serve their country. By 1946, the mine was forced to close due to a lack of available labor resources. My grandfather, Wayno Limbaum, arrived at the Flathead Mine as a foreman of a specialized Finnish blasting crew in 1944, and he worked there until its closing in 1946. Wayno lived at the mine with his wife Irene and their 3 children. My mother and her 2 brothers were a handful of children that attended the one-room schoolhouse at the Flathead Mine. Following the closure of the mine, Wayno was hired by Anaconda Mining Company to maintain the mine as its only caretaker. With the advent of more efficient smelting processes, Wayno saw an opportunity to restart the mine, and in 1958 he acquired a lease from the Anaconda Mining Company. He would run the mine with his 2 sons, Don and Frank, and about 20 other miners. In some old 8mm footage taken by my mother, my grandfather is captured working with his men and conducting blasting operations. Some of my earliest memories are of spending time at the mine with my family and my grandparents. My brother Mike and I spent a fair amount of time at the Flathead Mine as children, as did my cousins and their families. When I reached school age, we moved into the nearby town of Kalispell, Montana. In 1982, Wayno sold the remaining part of his lease back to the new owners, Coca Mining Company. Wayno was allowed to maintain access to the family cabin on the Flathead Mine grounds until his passing. As both a child and young adult, I made frequent trips to the mine with my grandparents to spend time at the family cabin. Once I got my driver's license, I became my grandfather's de facto chauffeur and would frequently drive him and my grandmother to the mine. After its final closure in 1982, Flathead Mine became more of a ghost town, which was completely surrounded by the natural forests of Montana, with thousands of acres in each direction. As I spent time there as a child and as a young adult, we did so as the early miners did, without running water or electricity. During the late 1980s, the Coca Mining Company began to collapse the tunnel entrances and tear down the old wooden structures that had been built in the 1920s. By 1990, only a few structures were left, to include our family cabin. It has been over 30 years since I last visited the Flathead Mine. The mine holds some of my most cherished memories from both childhood and young adulthood. I had no idea what to expect, and I figured there would be a good chance that our family cabin had also been torn down at this point. Our first stop on this adventure was Welcome Springs. It was still there, but obviously had not been maintained for over 30 years. Due to a gate limiting vehicle access, we had to walk the last mile and a half to the mine.
What is it?
As we were walking towards the mine, we found a small cabin that wasn't far from our own cabin. This gave me hope that there's a good chance that even our own family cabin that I grew up in may still be standing. Be careful of nails. We continued our journey, and it wasn't much further before we came across the family cabin. The finished bathhouse was still intact, as was the cabin. There was a great sense of joy to see the cabin one more time. It was obviously in disrepair, and Mother Nature had been doing its best to overtake the cabin and the surrounding grounds.
So I don't fall. Thank you.
I got you.
Thank you, sweetie.
We continue our journey down to the actual mine. All the buildings have now been torn down and all the mine tunnels have been collapsed. That said, it was still good to see the mine one last time and see the lands. After seeing the mine one last time, we headed back to the Bronco and considered a mission accomplished.
Okay, kids, go to your door.